they did not provide in that Constitution for a way of changing the Constitution. So the Constitution was changed again in 1838. They sort of created and made up their procedure, but again could not change the Constitution more often than once in 7 years. It was changed in 1850, 1857, 1864, and 1871, and then we had the war between the states. And the world changed after that, but the Pennsylvania Constitution was changed in 1874, and then again in 1967-68. So when you look at the different constitutions, those are the ones that are recognized. Now, a good book for studying that was put out by the Legislative Reference Bureau in Harrisburg in 1986, and it contains all the constitutions of Pennsylvania and the Constitution of the United States of America. So it's a good book. It was updated in 2007, so you might want to get a book from the bookstore, the state bookstore in Harrisburg, that lays out the different constitutions. When you look at the changes, you have to understand that changing the Constitution, be it state or federal, any Constitution, needs to be done according to the way that the Constitution requires, just like any other contract. Well, any change that's made contrary to that is unconstitutional and therefore null and void from the time that it was done. Now that principle of law is extremely important in understanding how we're going to fix the problems that we have today, because most of the changes to the state constitution and the federal constitution have been done unconstitutionally, and therefore as a matter of law do not exist. Now I would encourage all of you to take that piece of information and think about it and study it, but let me assure you that the history and law support that position. Well, the Pennsylvania Constitution, being a very powerful document, very well written document, amongst all of the 13, has a very strong Declaration of Rights. Now in the next session we'll be talking about the Declaration of Rights, but what I'd like to do is give you a few bullet points as to why we got in trouble and how that occurred, and then how we can fix it. First of all, after the war between the states, in fact during the war between the states, the central government became very powerful and in fact turned the relationship of the states, because originally the states were the superior power and the people have all the power, and the states represented that power as local government, and the states created the central government. Well, those who wanted a strong European-style government initially tried to get it in 1787 and weren't successful, and continued to try through time. But the war between the states created a tremendous crisis. If you think today's crisis or something, think about that crisis, and that Rahm Emanuel will be very proud of what occurred during the war between the states and thereafter. Well, that war was fought and continued until 1865, and shortly thereafter there was an amendment to the federal Constitution that was called the 13th Amendment, that freed the slaves and gave them rights. That amendment introduced a new concept of how to implement it. And originally, in Article 1, Section 8 of the Federal Constitution, the implementing provisions were necessary and proper legislation. In the 13th Amendment, it was changed to appropriate legislation to implement the 13th Amendment. There's a great difference between necessary and proper and appropriate. Well, that same enacting clause appeared in the 14th Amendment, which, by the way, proven to be improperly adopted and ratified. Therefore, it's unconstitutional. In procedure, and again in a subsequent discussion, we'll talk about that in great detail. The 14th Amendment changed the relationship between the states and the federal government, and then it became a national government. The Pennsylvania National Guard was created in 1870. The militia became the Pennsylvania National Guard in 1870. My question is, how in the world can an independent state have some military force that's a national anything if in fact it's still Pennsylvania as the primary creator of the central government. So think about that. We'll discuss that more in the future. Attorneys and judges became very active. They created the new air bar in 1878. They created the National Commissioners of Uniform State Laws in 1891. And then that body has been very active in changing the laws for, well, 120 years or so, approximately 120 years. Its signature work was the Uniform Commercial Code. And that was necessary because of the emergency powers that were created by Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1933. Again, we'll talk in great detail about these major points. There are a lot of things that went on in between that were created because of the so-called 14th Amendment and the alleged power that the central government, the now national government, had. In 1933, FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, nationalized this country, took the gold out of circulation. There needed to be a contract or, negotiable instruments law, which was the Uniform Commercial Code. That was done by the National Commissioners in 1940 to 1953. All the states approved it by 1968. Took silver out of circulation by 1972, and we were off of any solid currency. The central bank was created in 1913. There's all sorts of things you need to understand as to how we got in this problem. But we are here today, and the central government seems to be doing anything and everything it wants to do. And by the way, it's no longer a Republican form of government. It is a central, national government with total power. You can call it what you want. Is it a democracy, not a republic? Is it a socialist police state? You make the choice. But clearly they have gone way beyond the Constitution. And as we look at these issues and things that have happened over time, it'll become more clear. What I'd like to do is spend the rest of our time in these sessions to talk about a solution that I recommend. It's available in the form of a state, county, and local civil action plan. It was formulated last year, and it is being implemented in several states across the United States, but particularly here in Pennsylvania. It is a two-page document, and you can certainly get it if you request it, and we'll give you the information to do that. The first part is happening, and it's great. I was trying to network people across Pennsylvania in the early 90s, I and others, and we formed the Pennsylvania Committee of Correspondence. That is still in existence. But this plan is really for you to get involved. The first part is for you to get with other people of like mind and study the fundamental documents and the forming documents of this country, like the Declaration of Independence, the Constitutions, the Federalist, Anti-Federal Paper, and so forth. And understand really how we're supposed to operate. And then I think it'll become evident that it isn't operating that way. And then join with others in groups, and join groups together across the county, across the state, across the nation, but primarily locally. So in order to do that, we need to have that provision. We also need to learn and help the sheriffs of each county know that they're the chief peace officer in the county, and to collect together to do that. We are forming sheriff brigades in every county in Pennsylvania, and we'll talk about that more in the future. The third part is to have citizens' grand juries and petit juries. Those are juries of trials that can judge both the law and the facts the way it's supposed to be. We need to, in fact, have the people in charge of indictment rather than the DA and the government. They're the ones that have created the problem. The last part is to elect constitutional statesmen and stateswomen who will follow the Constitution and their oath of office strictly. If we do this, we will be able to bring our government back into control. The key to making it happen is the sheriff brigade and getting the sheriff to do their job. I look forward to continuing our discussion, and have a good day. Thank you very much.